More massive protests in the U.S. as they continue over the death of George Floyd. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and other Canadian leaders answering questions about racism here at home today.
Everyone needs to be on the same page for safety, because it's not just those workers, it's the locals, it's the managers, it's the salespeople. It can affect everyone.
Kingsville's mayor speaking out about what more can be done to protect farm workers. This as COVID-19 numbers continue to grow in that sector. Splash of rain last night, but we are gearing up for a classic southwestern Ontario sunset this evening. It should happen around 9 o'clock. It's 30 degrees outside right now. Colette Kennedy will have all of the details in her forecast. I'm Chris Ensing. Thanks for joining us. Another person has died of COVID-19 in Windsor, Essex, a woman in her 70s who lived at a long-term care home. That's now 66 people that have died from COVID-19 since the pandemic started. We begin tonight with a look at active cases in our area. 977 people have tested positive for the coronavirus in Windsor, Essex. Of those, about a quarter of them are self-isolating. That's the red graph there. We're just pulling up the number of resolved cases. That's in blue. That's been hovering around 50% now for a few weeks. Here's another shift that we've started to see with those confirmed cases. In farm workers, including migrant and domestic, it's up to 18% of all COVID-19 tests that were positive. Farms have now been deemed a high-risk area as of last week. Now, people working in healthcare, that's another high-risk setting at 23%, according to our health unit. Let's take a quick look at testing as well. If you want to get a test, you can go to the hospital in Leamington or downtown Windsor. And here's where the drive-through testing will be happening tomorrow, Kingsville at the recreational sports field. But with all this increased testing, the health unit says that they can't accurately update the public in their daily briefings on the number of people tested.
And now that the testing has been expanded broadly with many partners testing, our numbers will not be accurate, so we do not want to misrepresent any information that will give any false information. So that's why we will report mainly on the positives and some of the work that has been doing, and we'll continue to do that.
Another part of the announcement this morning was that a farm worker in Essex County has tested positive for COVID-19. Now, as we already mentioned, farm workers make up 18% of all cases in Windsor, Essex. The mayor of one rural municipality is calling for more to be done to keep workers safe. The CBC's Jason Vio has been following this, joins us live now with more. Jason, what have you heard?
Well, Chris, I did get a chance to briefly speak with some migrant workers in Leamington today, and they tell me as farm workers, they're not allowed to speak to the media, or at least they're being told not to. They were getting their groceries in town today with a company car, but some people are speaking on their behalf, and that includes Kingsville's mayor with some concern. He says anytime he hears about someone in his community contracting COVID-19, especially in the agriculture industry, he says it's very concerning. And just yesterday we learned of a 31-year-old migrant worker who died of COVID-19 over the weekend, and he worked at a facility in Kingsville known as Woodside Greenhouses. And Mayor Nelson Santos says he wants to see more testing in his municipality. He says he doesn't want precautions to let up, even though businesses are starting to slowly reopen, the economy as well. And he also says he wants to kind of have officials double check greenhouses and farming operations when it comes to safety.
This is another call that says, let's take another look at your housing. Are they spaced enough from each other? Does that have to have another, should we have another look at that? Have everyone do that second round check. Like, let's do another investigation to ensure the spacing is available. Let's do another round of, for our workers, the municipalities, by law enforcement officers, our fire inspectors, they go to those sites as well before approvals, along with the health unit. Let's all do one more round, and let's make sure we're tightening everything up and everything is covered in terms of the social distancing requirements and obviously the safety and the environment that the workers are living in.
It kind of echoes what Premier Doug Ford was saying yesterday, that he'll talk with public health officials, but specifically about testing all migrant workers. What's our health unit saying about this, Jason?
Well, today, Chris, they highlighted the fact that there are more than 170 agriculture operations right here across Windsor and Essex County, and with that, more than 8,000 workers in that industry alone in our region. And our local medical officer of health says without a concrete strategy, testing all of them doesn't seem possible.
there is a strategy that is being unfolded by the ministry to expand testing and include these group for testing as well. So I'm looking forward to get more information to see how this would be unfold. Our focus right now is case and contact management, and we'll continue to do that and expand the testing as needed based on the case and contact management piece.
Now, there's also some political movement on this from the provincial opposition. The NDP sending out a letter today calling on the Ford government to have some immediate action when it comes to the COVID-19 hotspots in the agriculture sector right here in our region and in other spots across the province. And Essex MPP Taras Natashak was part of that letter, and he is calling for better protections for workers and addressing what he calls crowded bunkhouses. Chris.
Thanks for this. This is the CBC Jason Veal live tonight. The unrest over George Floyd's death continues to roil across many U.S. cities, despite Donald Trump's threat to send in the military to crack down on violence. The use of force that was on full display yesterday in front of the White House, that was something we saw. But there were more moves that appears to have only added more fuel to the fire. Ellen Morrow reports.
Would you shoot me because Donald Trump told you to?
Protesters and police separated by a new fence fortifying the White House. In the same spot yesterday, police used tear gas and rubber bullets, pushing back peaceful crowds for President Trump to have this photo op outside a historic D.C. church, a use of force widely condemned.
This was a charade that in some ways was meant to bolster a message that does nothing to calm the soul and to reassure the nation that we can recover.
Trump ordered troops to the streets of Washington after nights of unrest. U.S. military helicopters buzzing over U.S. citizens in the U.S. Capitol.
Bringing in the active duty military against Americans for any reason is inappropriate.
The president tweeted D.C. had no problems last night, overwhelming force before thanking himself. In a starkly different tone, his Democratic rival urged action on police reform.
Donald Trump has turned this country into a battlefield riven by old resentments and fresh fears. The moment has come for our nation to deal with systemic racism.
That racism fueling even more protests last night.
This is very important because if we just stop, then they'll think it's okay, but we have to keep fighting for our rights.
Most were peaceful, but some saw violent clashes and looting. At least 9 people have died in the unrest. Today, the demonstrations continue. This crowd in Manhattan marching in the name of George Floyd and the cause of change. Ellen Morrow, CBC News, Toronto.
Meanwhile, protesters are already standing outside the Detroit Police Department at this hour. Each night, the city has seen peaceful demonstrations that have at times turned tense after police used tear gas. The city put a curfew in place last night, and the protest ended peacefully. It's something that the police chief says he's proud of, and a deputy chief spoke to at a press conference this afternoon.
The fact that we experienced a night without violence, just to see the protesters protest First Amendment for George Floyd, just proud.
Justin Trudeau did a delicate dance today as he fielded questions about events happening south of the border. Here's David Cochrane on how the Prime Minister and other party leaders are reacting to events.
The Prime Minister had to know the question was coming.
But we do have Donald Trump now calling for military action against protesters.
But it still seemed to catch him off guard.
I'd like to ask you what you think about that. And if you don't want to comment, what message do you think you're sending?
For 21 seconds, Justin Trudeau gathered his thoughts, picking every word carefully.
We all watch in horror and consternation what's going on in the United States. It is a time to pull people together, but it is a time to listen.
Trudeau spoke broadly about racism and injustice, but not directly about the use of tear gas and rubber bullets against protesters to clear a path for a presidential photo op.
Anti-black racism is happening here, everywhere in Canada, every single day.
Instead, Trudeau and other leaders looked inward to acknowledge racial injustice in Canada, to voice frustration.
You know what? People are done with pretty speeches, particularly pretty speeches from people in power that could do something about it right now if they wanted to.
To promise change.
Because I want you to know that our government is listening. We hear your calls for justice, equality, and accountability.
With the U.S. in turmoil, it's no surprise that Trudeau would steer clear of provoking Trump. The Canada-U.S. border is closed, but still subject to delicate negotiations to ensure a steady supply of masks, medicine, and food can come to Canada. David Cochran, CBC News, Ottawa.
Premier Ford was also asked about the situation in the United States today. He says that he has personally never tolerated racism, and he added that there are vast differences between Canada and the U.S. when it comes to race relations.
Thank God that we're different than the United States, and we don't have the systemic, deep roots they have had for years. When I went down to the U.S., spent 20 years back and forth building the company down there. I said the difference between the U.S. and Canada, for the most part, we get along. We all live beside each other. We work together. We share communities. We go shopping. Believe me, it's night and day.
Ontario has extended its state of emergency over COVID-19 until the end of June. This as officials are trying to trace the contacts of hundreds of people whose positive tests for the disease weren't reported to health officials. CBC Toronto broke the story last night. Queen's Park reporter Mike Crawley is looking into what went wrong and what's being done to make sure that it doesn't happen again.
The hundreds of positive tests that went unreported were conducted by the William Osler Health System, mostly at this drive-through assessment center in Etobicoke. The samples were processed by the lab at Mount Sinai. According to the province, sometimes the labs inform public health of the positive tests, sometimes it's the job of the assessment center.
There were about 700 cases that were not reported to public health due to misunderstanding between the hospital and the lab that conducted the tests. However, that has been rectified to make sure that it won't happen again.
Even as the health minister confirms the accuracy of CBC's reporting about the mix-up, the premier praises the province's testing system.
I want to thank the public health folks and Ontario Health and everyone out there doing the testing. They've really ramped it up. Our testing has gone up. We have a great testing strategy.
Ontario Health is in charge of the province's COVID-19 lab system. It's a new provincial agency created by the Ford government. It says it takes full responsibility for the mix-up and says it is sorry for what happened.
We have fixed the situation and everyone is very clear on their reporting obligations.
What's not clear? How many of the unreported positives are still to be added to the COVID-19 case count? Ontario's average number of new cases daily has moved like a roller coaster this past month. It trended down in early May, up in the middle of the month, then back down again, but in the past few days, it's rising.
To have 700 test results not be reported properly and then not be able to contact trace those raises serious concerns about the province's reopening plan if we can't get this right.
This latest testing controversy shows the flaws in Ontario's health technology, according to this expert.
We're sort of relying on systems that are set up to be susceptible to human error. And so we're getting the result that the systems are designed to produce, which is we're getting mistakes and it sets us back.
Today, 446 new cases reported in the province, the highest number in nearly a month. Mike Crawley, CBC News, Toronto.
Playground equipment around the city of Windsor is still off limits, according to the provincial state of emergency. But one woman has taken to social media asking that children be allowed back on the structures. Dale Molnar looks at how it might be possible.
Jill Thompson lives in an apartment in Forest Glade and says her daughter and other kids need someplace to play.
So my daughter's amazing, but she needs round-the-clock entertainment, and it's hard for me. I go on walks with her. My feet are tired. Like, she wants the playground, like all the kids do.
Thompson has taken to Facebook to push for a limited opening of some of the playground equipment.
Would put some hand washing stations in. I'd have the parks, only certain ones, open for certain hours of the day, monitoring how many people could come in, maybe have some people that were laid off come back and work, policing the areas to make sure everybody's keeping their distance.
This nurse doesn't understand why that can't happen.
Just keeping your kids physically distanced from other kids, limiting maybe the number of kids that can be on the equipment at a time, and just making sure they're cleaning their hands, they know their boundaries, and they're making sure their hands are clean, and as long as it's safe on the playgrounds, it's something that they can do.
But the city's hands are tied. The province has not yet allowed playground equipment and pools to open. When they do, however, the city is planning to institute some of those rules, like fewer than 5 will be able to use them.
Ensuring that the proper spacing of 2 meters is being followed. Again, all of the measures to, touch as few things as possible, continue to wash your hands, not be at a park amenity if you're feeling sick or under the weather.
Even though the city has taped off the playground equipment with caution tape at the various playgrounds around the city, it's obvious that there's a lot of people not paying attention to the rules and just using the equipment anyway.
Chaco says the parks are patrolled by auxiliary police and by law enforcement, and if they find someone using the equipment, they are reminded of the law. The restrictions were supposed to expire on June 9th, but the province has now extended them to the end of the month. Dale Molnar, CBC News, Windsor.
Check this out here. Shots of the Labor Day parade in Windsor back in the 1950s. This year was shot at Tecumseh Road in Olette, part of a unique collection of old films shot in this city. Local filmmaker Mike Evans has been sharing them online in a series called It Happened in Windsor. Now, for the last couple of years, he's been collecting 16mm and 8mm film, often found in people's basements, tucked away for decades, for moments like this. This gem right here, the reel of the parade, he actually found at a thrift shop. And we'll share some more of the video later in the show. You can read the full story on cbc.ca/Windsor. And after the break, Colette Kennedy has the full forecast. Joining us now for a live look at the weather is Colette Kennedy. Colette, it was nice. We were able to sneak out to the riverfront today, do a little bit of a walk, saw those high water levels, but the winds were calm. Everything seemed kind of good today.
Yeah, really nice. Those winds were kind of out of the west-southwest for most of the day, and boy, did that temperature soar. So it probably felt good to have a little bit of a breeze, right? Our average high is 23.6, but look at this. Today's high, round that up to 31. Now, not a record. 31.6 is the record for this date in history. That was set back in 2007, but this is the unofficial high, so you never know. Our average low, 12.6, and yeah, we were ahead of the game on that one, too. Look at what's going on with the daytime highs, though, if we just look across southwestern and eastern Ontario. So if we compare Windsor at 31, look at Kingston, 14 degrees, a 17-degree temperature difference for the daytime highs. In fact, they only warmed up 3 degrees from where they were this morning, but it's because of that same breeze, that southwesterly breeze there, really coming right in off the lake, cooling things down. Now, in terms of any active weather, a severe thunderstorm watch is well off to the east and northeast of us here. We could see some storms, but they're not expected to develop to becoming severe. So just be aware, there's always the risk of isolated severe, and lightning and heavy downpours are still a concern. Our current temperature, I already showed you Chatham-Kent as well at 31, but now factoring in the humidity, feels like upper 30s, almost 40 degrees. I know the conditions are quiet at the moment. It looks more like kind of late overnight tonight when we start to get into a situation where we'll see some development back to the west of us. This is 5:30 in the morning, and then that kind of rolling through and getting a little bit heavier as it spreads out and gets more organized in the morning hours. So there's a risk overnight, but it's really late overnight. And then tomorrow, some more development into the afternoon. So still some isolated thunderstorms could come back. Otherwise, in between, it's actually going to be quite a nice day with a lot of sunshine. And speaking of sunshine, boy, oh boy, there's going to be plenty of that for us into Thursday. Very mild. We're holding on to a lot of this heat overnight tonight, only about a 10-degree drop or so. And then tomorrow afternoon, again, it's not going to be everywhere where it's a rain out. These will be very, very spotty in nature. There are those nice conditions, though, for Thursday. Still a little bit sticky, but not as. And then into Friday, there is a chance for some showers again, getting close to 30 degrees for the high. Some drier air moves in terms of the dew points will come down for the weekend. At this time anyway, Chris, it is looking like a very nice weekend forecast.
One of the things we always talk about when we see the rain on that forecast is that it's a hit or miss in southwestern Ontario. It all depends on the radar, eh?
Yes, but it keeps it interesting, right? A little bit of everything.
Right? It's a nice delight when you find out, oh, that's not my area. It's my neighbor. They're dealing with this rain today.
Yep, exactly. I guess.
It's something. Thanks, Colette.
You're welcome.
Now, coming up, we've shown you the videos, the pictures from the protests, but there are discussions among people in the healthcare industry about what this could mean for the pandemic and COVID-19 if a spread could occur. That's up next. public health experts fear that the ongoing protests will lead to new outbreaks of COVID-19. As Christine Birak explains, the coronavirus has already affected people of color disproportionately.
Large gatherings of people screaming to be heard. Some are being met with violence, pepper spray, tear gas. Many are coughing and gasping for air, fueling a pandemic that's claiming lives every day.
Irrespective of which pandemic you're interested in, people in poverty, people of African American descent here in the U.S. Are the people that are going to be hit either way.
Researchers found in Chicago alone, Black Americans make up about 30% of the population, but they account for nearly 70% of COVID-19 deaths in that city.
How are you feeling today?
Doctors say in some Canadian provinces, the numbers are similar.
We know in Ontario that nearly 70% of COVID cases have happened in our most ethnically dense and racialized communities.
Many doctors insist long before COVID-19 came along, racial discrimination has been a major obstacle for communities of color. It affects how children are treated in school, their success later in the job market, right through to receiving health care.
We also know that diagnoses like cancer can often happen later, for example, in skin cancer in Black people, because of the way the medical system teaches clinicians how to pick up cancers like that.
ER doctor Tasleem Nimji says protests may bring a wave of COVID-19 patients into her hospital.
We don't want to see disease spread, but at the same time, I certainly empathize with the folks that feel the urge to stand up and to speak.
Health experts say the actions of police, including the use of tear gas and pepper spray, should also be scrutinized.
Some of their potentially usual policing tactics and safety tactics may actually be inappropriate in a time when there is a pandemic of a respiratory virus that is spread by people coughing.
People who are citizens that governments are obligated to protect. Christine Birak, CBC News, Toronto.
A fascinating new visitor to Montreal has been making quite a splash around the city for several days now. This wayward humpback whale was first spotted near Montreal's Old Port on Saturday. It's been hanging around ever since. Marine experts say that they've never seen a whale of this size so far south of the St. Lawrence, and that it might be a bit disoriented. But so far, it has not been showing any signs of distress. 6:29 p.m. and that's it for CBC Windsor News. As promised, another look back at some of those discovered old films that were shot in Windsor decades ago. Filmmaker Mike Evans collecting the video and sharing it on his YouTube page. You can go to our website, cbc.ca/Windsor, for more on this story and the others that we've told you tonight. Thanks again for watching and have a good evening.